In this video, we'll be taking a look at 3 college basketball games happening on December 13, 2025, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 6 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 3 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Arkansas versus Texas Tech. This one has that big game feel before the ball even goes up. Neutral floor, big arena in Dallas, national TV, and 2 ranked teams carrying matching 7-2 records into a rematch that Arkansas fans have had circled since March. Texas Tech sits as the tiny favorite on the board, basically asking a simple question: in a one-possession kind of game, who handles the pressure better this time? The last time these two met, Texas Tech erased a huge second-half lead and stole an 85-83 overtime win in the Sweet 16, so you know there is plenty of emotional baggage packed into this trip, and that matters when you start thinking about which locker room is more comfortable if this turns into another 1 or 2 possession grind at the end. Here is the thing: when you peel away the noise and the revenge angle, Arkansas has quietly built the kind of on-court profile that travels really well to a neutral court like this. They play fast, but they are not reckless. They attack the paint, live at the free throw line, and they have enough length on the wings to bother Texas Tech's shooters instead of just hoping Tech finally cools off on its own. Tech wants this to be a game where their spacing and shooting carry the day, and they absolutely can light it up from deep. But when a spread is this short, you start caring a lot more about rebounding, whistles, and which team is more likely to manufacture ugly points when shots stop falling for a few minutes. Arkansas has been covering numbers consistently as an underdog, especially in spots where everyone expects the other team to be a touch smoother and more polished, while Texas Tech has not exactly been a printing press as a favorite against the spread lately, and that history tilts the risk toward the underdog side of this matchup rather than the favorite. Honestly, you can almost picture how this plays out late. Tech's crowd will have its run, Arkansas will probably have a run of its own, and then in the last 4 or 5 minutes it turns into a one-possession affair where every offensive rebound and every free throw trip starts to feel like it weighs 10 pounds. That kind of environment usually rewards the tougher, more physical group that is happy to absorb contact, chase loose balls, and keep attacking instead of settling for the first semi-open jumper. With the line sitting where it is, you do not even need Arkansas to rewrite the whole tournament story to make them worth backing. You just need them to keep doing what they have been doing, which is hanging around with good teams and making people sweat tickets that are written against them. As our first pick for this matchup, the Arkansas Razorbacks to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The total number hanging out in that low to mid 150s range tells you the market is expecting a bit of a track meet. On paper, that makes sense. Arkansas is putting up close to 88 points per game. Texas Tech sits north of 80, and both teams have had nights where they look like they can score every trip for long stretches. But totals are not just about raw averages. They are about how these styles clash over 40 minutes, and this particular clash has some sneaky things going on under the hood that point in the opposite direction of a pure shootout vibe. Texas Tech has been very vocal about wanting its identity to sit on the defensive end this season, and you can see it in the numbers and the way they play. They hold teams right around 70 points per night, they are long on the perimeter, and they close out on threes as if every possession is the last one of the game. Arkansas, for all the highlight plays and pace, has also been better defensively than the reputation suggests, especially when the opponent is somebody they actually respect. When both squads are this invested in guarding, you tend to get longer, more physical possessions, fewer easy runouts, and more half-court sets where coaches are yelling out actions and everyone knows what is coming. That is not the recipe for a constant 80 possessions of chaos and open floor layups. It is more of a game that breathes in the middle and tightens around each timeout. There is also the familiarity angle to think about. These groups just spent a whole NCAA tournament game chasing each other's actions, then had an entire offseason and early season scouting cycle to live with that tape. When teams know each other that well, the first instinct is often to over-prepare on defense, to take away the pet sets and the early offense stuff that created all the pain last time. You can still get some hot stretches, especially with the level of shot making on both sides, but over the full game that kind of familiarity usually trims a few points off what you would expect if these were random non-conference opponents meeting for the first time. One more little wrinkle here: the recent trend profiles line up with a quieter scoreboard than the public perception might. Both Arkansas and Texas Tech have been involved in plenty of games that land under the total despite their scoring talent, which is what happens when you pair efficient offenses with defenses that make you work deep into the clock. In a neutral site, high-stakes, revenge-flavored matchup, it is very easy for nerves, whistles, and deliberate coaching decisions to shave just enough possessions and efficiency to matter against a number in the 150s. So if you are betting on rhythm here, the more realistic rhythm feels a bit more controlled than the box scores might make you think at first glance. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Marquette versus Purdue. This matchup is funny because on paper it looks like a video game on rookie mode, but the number the books have hung on it is big enough that people start second-guessing themselves. Mackey Arena will be loud. Purdue is sitting on 9 wins to 1 loss, and that Iowa State smack in this same building still lingers in everyone's memory. On the other side, you have a Marquette team that feels more like a coin flip night to night. 5 wins to 5 losses, coming off getting blasted by Wisconsin and trying to convince itself this is a reset spot rather than a please let this be over spot. Here is the thing: when you look past the logos and just think about how these two teams actually function over 40 minutes, the spread starts to feel less like an insult and more like a pretty rational tax for walking into Mackey. Purdue is playing like a machine that has finally figured out all its buttons. The offense is not just efficient, it is ruthless, sitting at the top of the national charts in adjusted offensive efficiency and chugging along at about 85 points per game on just over 50% shooting from the field and over 40% from 3. That is not hot shooting week, that is who they are right now. The part that quietly matters for a big number like this is that the defense is not some sieve trying to hang on. It sits in that top 30 band nationally, so they can build a lead and then actually keep it instead of getting dragged into a track meet they never wanted. The matchup problem for Marquette is less about one superstar mismatch and more about a slow bleed across the whole front line. Purdue's size and depth inside is a headache across 40 minutes, not 15. Oscar Clough, Trey Kaufman-Renn, and Daniel Jacobson are not just tall bodies, they are active, physical, and happy to turn every miss into a new possession. We just saw what happened to Minnesota when that wave kept coming. A tight 3-point game at half turned into a 28-point burial after a run that went from 21-0, then 29-2, and suddenly it looked like one team had been playing a different sport the whole time. Marquette's front court, for all its length and energy, has shown real problems holding up against teams that keep hammering the paint and the glass, and that is exactly the kind of opponent they are walking into here. Offensively, Marquette is not broken, they are just high variance in all the wrong ways for this kind of spread. They score about 80.9 points per game and give up 76.4, shoot roughly 42.5% from the field and just over 31% from deep. That profile screams we can hang until we suddenly cannot. Chase Ross has been fantastic as a lead scorer, basically flirting with 20 points a night, but so much of what Marquette does depends on tough shot making and rhythm. When those jumpers are falling, you get flashes of the old Golden Eagles. When they are not, you get a 96-76 loss to Wisconsin where the opponent bombs 14 threes and everything feels uphill. If you layer that on top of the boat with a hole in the hull, problem their own analytics folks have been talking about, it starts to feel like you need a lot of small things to go Marquette's way just to stay in shouting distance. The top of the rotation can absolutely compete, especially on a one-off hot shooting day, but the depth behind those main guys has not consistently played at a true high major starter level. That shows up late in games, and it shows up even more when you keep taking punches in a building that feeds on momentum like Mackey. Honestly, if you picture this game 10 different times in your head, the scenario where the home favorite gets rolling, the crowd gets loud, and the underdog's shot selection gets worse by the minute shows up more often than the clean cover for the dog version. That is really what this spread is asking you, which of those scripts you believe is more representative of who these teams have been through 10 games. As our first pick for this matchup, the Purdue Boilermakers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The total number is sitting in the low 150s, that 153.5 range, which means the market is basically saying, do you believe we get something like 80 to 75, or do we land closer to a mid-80s to mid-60s kind of score? To sort that out, you kind of have to ignore the brand names and think about how these two teams prefer to breathe. Purdue, for all the fireworks, is not racing. Their adjusted tempo sits around 66 possessions, bottom 40 nationally, and that slow, deliberate style is not an accident. It is built into how they control games. They run sharp stuff, they use clock, and they make you guard for the full possession. That is beautiful basketball, but it is not exactly Red Bull hoops. Marquette, on the other hand, looks faster on TV than the numbers really say. The scoring looks fun at 80.9 a night, but if you scroll through their season stats, you see a lot of games where that offense has to work very hard just to get into the high 70s. The shooting profile tells you why. Around 42.5% overall, just over 31% from three, some long stretches of cold jumpers, and then a few wild runs where it all clicks and they blitz somebody. The problem, from a total perspective, is that those everything clicks stretches have not been happening against disciplined, top-flight defenses, and here they are running into one that already sits in that top 30 efficiency band and just strangled Minnesota for an entire half. Here is where it gets a little counterintuitive. Big spreads scare people off unders because they imagine some goofy fourth quarter with walk-ons trading threes. In college, though, when a very efficient, slowish favorite plays from in front, what you often get is fewer possessions, not more. They squeeze the clock, pound the interior, force you into late clock jumpers, and then calmly walk it back the other way. You can have one team scoring very well on a per-possession basis and still land under a big total if the game never really opens up. On the flip side, if Marquette has one of those nights where the outside shots finally fall and their confidence spikes, the first thing that usually happens is not both teams go nuts. It is their defense tightens just enough to avoid a full track meet. They are not playing the kind of chaos style where every make turns into a pickup game. If you ballpark this matchup using who these teams have been, not who they were in past years, you end up circling a range where the total score often lives in the mid-40s to very low 150s. Purdue's offense can absolutely live in the low 80s against a defense that has already allowed 96 to Wisconsin and mid-70s on a regular basis, while Marquette's own attack, shooting what it has been shooting and dealing with a long, physical defense, will often find itself stuck somewhere in the low to mid-60s in this specific kind of environment. Sure, there is a universe where whistles pile up, free throws balloon the score, and both teams live at the line, but that is asking for a lot of things to break against how these two like to manage a high-profile game. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Nebraska versus Illinois. Nebraska rolls into Champaign with that weird mix bettors secretly love and odds makers quietly fear. Undefeated record, double-digit wins stacked like firewood, and still this feeling that the market has not quite caught up yet. They have not just been winning, they have been settling games early, bullying Wisconsin by 30, smothering Creighton like someone turned the gym lights off on their shooters, and stretching that overall win streak to 14. Illinois, for their part, is no fraud either, sitting comfortably as a top national seed type profile, piling up points in the high 80s and winning by nearly 20 on average, so this line paints a clear picture of where the books think the gap is. Big home brand, loud building, historic series edge for the Illini, and a decade of Nebraska horror stories in this building baked into the number. Here is the thing. When you strip out the branding and look at how these two actually want to play this specific year, the spread starts to feel a little rich. Nebraska's defense has that annoying personality that favorite backers hate, the kind that does not gamble a ton, that stays in gaps, that contests everything, and that makes even good offenses feel like they need 4 passes just to get into a simple ball screen. You saw it against Creighton when they held them to 50. You saw it against Wisconsin when the Badgers just kept running into a red wall for 40 minutes. That is not an accident. It is a connected, veteran rotation that knows where to be and when to rotate. Offensively, Nebraska is not playing cute either. They space you with a skilled big who can pull shot blockers away from the rim, shooters who are comfortable taking threes off movement instead of just spot-ups, and a couple of downhill guards who are happy to live at the paint and then kick it back out if the lane closes. That style is tailor-made to punish a favorite that assumes it can simply lean on talent and crowd noise. Illinois will absolutely punch back with their size and shot making, But the more this turns into a half-court chess match, the more those extra possessions created by Nebraska's discipline, their rebounding effort, and their willingness to make the extra pass start to matter. And once you mix in Illinois dealing with a long-term absence for a key utility wing and a still not quite right front-court rotation thanks to lingering concussion issues for a depth big, the on-paper gap narrows even more than this line suggests. In a game where both teams are already playing at a high level, that many points attached to a locked-in, undefeated dog is simply too generous to ignore, especially with how battle-tested Nebraska already looks against real opposition. As our first pick for this matchup, the Nebraska Cornhuskers to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Now let's talk about the total, because this number is loud. On the surface, it makes sense. One side is scoring in the mid to high 80s, the other is living in the low 80s, and both have stretches where they look like NBA Jam when they get rolling. Illinois has nights where they blow past 100 like it is nothing, and Nebraska just hung 90 on Wisconsin without really needing to push the tempo into chaos. If you only scan box scores on your phone, a total in the mid-150s feels perfectly reasonable, maybe even low. The rhythm of this matchup is a little trickier than that, though. Nebraska's defensive personality tends to sand down the edges of games. They are not walking the ball up like an old-school grinded-out squad, but they are smart about when to run and when to pull it out, almost like a point guard who knows when to tap the brakes on a fast break that is not clean. Illinois, for all their scoring, has quietly leaned into a more physical, structured approach in their bigger tests, using their size to dictate which shots opponents are allowed to take rather than just racing up and down. You saw hints of that in how they handled Tennessee, forcing ugly possessions, living with long twos, and trusting that their own shot quality would eventually separate. Here is the subtle part that matters for a total. Both teams defend the three well enough, and both are comfortable shooting a lot of them. When you combine that, you get a game script with plenty of long rebounds, some choppy stretches, and a scoring rhythm that can stall for 2 or 3 minutes at a time even when the final score still looks respectable. Toss in late-game scenarios where, unless something truly wild is happening, neither coach will be thrilled about turning this into a track meet against another top-tier offense, and you get more possessions that feel like half-court problem-solving than open-floor fireworks. That does not mean this turns into some ugly rock fight, but it does mean the number is asking for a very friendly environment for shot-making from both sides at the same time for a full 40 minutes. With how both defenses are trending and how disciplined these rotations look right now, that is a big ask. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.